Welcome in, everybody, to this Kansas City Chiefs live stream presented by Bleacher Report. I'm your host, Michael Darcy, and I'm joined by my co-host, Joey Segura. And over the course of the next 25 to 30 minutes, we are going to break down and discuss if the Kansas City Chiefs' current wide receiver core is good enough to win the Super Bowl. And that is the biggest topic of conversation over the past couple weeks. The wide receivers have not been good, and we kind of talked about it a little bit yesterday in the Chiefs-Eagles post-game breakdown, that the Chiefs might still be good enough to go to another Super Bowl and potentially win it with the wide receivers that they currently have. Now, I know that you who are watching this right now are probably seeing the wide receivers that are on your screen right now, and it's like, that's just a terrifying unit, right? Well, even if they might not be the most fearsome wide receiver group, I think they might be good enough to get the job done. Joey, what are your thoughts? Do you think that there is potentially a chance that they can start figuring it out and putting together a good run?
I think so. I think our expectations have had to change overall throughout the season. I think going in, there were question marks about the wide receiver group, and we were hoping that it could become one of the better units, even though we might not have, an A-list wide receiver. Even going into the season, we knew that, but we were hoping a bunch of these guys could be just solid playmakers with Travis Kelce. That's not what's happened. And really, at this point, it's kind of shifted to, can they be good enough going into the playoffs for a 3 or 4 game stretch to get the job done? And I think the answer is yes. I think they have throughout the season and previous times. I really think that they're going to have to get some guys more involved. Kadarius Toney and Rashee Rice mainly. I think that Rashee has shown already that he can be a great wide receiver on a championship winning team. But as we just had somebody just say, it's going to come down to drop footballs. They're just dropping them. I mean, that's Mahomes is throwing it on the money. Like you said yesterday, it's very similar to Super Bowl 55, the one we lost, where it just felt like we were giving it to everybody and they couldn't do it. But it's going to come down to, are they going to drop the football anymore? And are they going to be able to find the soft spot and zones on defense? Because that's the thing Kelce's the best at. That's what has made him as good as he is he's always able to find a soft spot in the defense. And he's able to just kind of sit there and get that football. And Mahomes can read that. I watched some clips from the Eagles game, and the receivers don't know when to keep running, when to stop running. So, it's going to be tough, but I do think that this wide receiver unit might have enough in them to be able to get the job done for a couple of games in the playoffs.
Listen, all we need them to do is win 2-3 games tops. 3 games, if you get the 1 seed, you will win the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
3 games is a lot. Don't get me wrong. But I do think this wide receiver core has it in them. They might not be playing well right now. But the point is, they've got another month of the season to figure it out and try to correct some of the mistakes. And as we talked about in yesterday's live stream, if you missed it, it's already available on the Bleacher Report mobile app. Just scroll down, you can find it. The Chiefs wide receivers are not going to get drastically better this season. We're not going to magically turn into one of the better units in the league. That's not going to happen. The Chiefs wide receiver group is probably the worst in the NFL right now. And it might be the worst unit the rest of the season. The point is, they have been in all of these games that they have lost. And the only reason they have lost these games is because the wide receivers are either dropping the football or having these miscues, and that's unacceptable. If they can correct some of those things, you're winning some of these games because your defense is so good. So I do think the wide receiver group is good enough because you have Patrick Mahomes, you have Andy Reid, and this defense is going to allow the wide receivers to get away with not being very good. So I do think that the Chiefs can get to and win another Super Bowl with the wide receivers that are on roster. The question is going to be, can they limit the mistakes? Can they stop shooting themselves in the foot? Because when you're turning the ball over and you're not catching the football and, you're just making blatant mistakes like MVS not coming back to the football or Sky Moore running the wrong route. Mecole Hardman has run the wrong route for the last 4 years in Kansas City. So if they can limit those mistakes and play a more clean game of football, I think they are good enough to go back to the Super Bowl and win the whole thing.
I think so too. And obviously the wide receiver core is going to get catch the main attention from haters and things like that. And they probably should, to be honest with you. I mean, they were terrible. But at the same time, you can watch that Eagles game Mahomes had a terrible red zone interception. That should have been a touchdown, and he didn't put enough zip on the ball to Watson. Kelce fumbled at the 10-yard line. So those are two prime scoring drives that you just handed back to Philadelphia. And, for all we know, MVS would have dropped another touchdown pass, or Watson would have dropped that touchdown pass if Mahomes had made the throw a little bit better. But the point is, though, they weren't even given a chance there. And it's tough, though, because earlier in that game, too, MVS had a route deep. It wasn't a go route, but he broke free from his defender and had just nothing but open field. And so Mahomes threw it deep for him, and it was basically the home run ball. It was going to be a touchdown if he caught it. And MVS just decided to come back towards the football. Why? Like, he's too good of a football player in prior years, and he's a veteran. He should not be making these mistakes. I think it's going to be interesting to see if they can get Kadarius Toney and Rashee Rice schemed up a little bit more. I think Rashee has been nothing but great, really, since he stepped in, and I wish they would target him more. I feel like they're not doing enough to utilize him, considering he already looks like an above-average NFL wide receiver right now. I think Kadarius Toney has that potential too, but Kadarius Toney needs the ball in his hands. And at this point, what we might need to just accept with Kadarius is that he's a gadget football player, and that there's nothing wrong with that. I don't mean that in a bad, negative way. But I mean, you saw him, we tried to get him in running the football. He's able to make plays. He's just so quick and so shifty that if you got to just throw some check down passes, even though I normally hate those, if you can throw it to Kadarius Toney in open field, give him some space, same with running the football, you got to start doing that. But I mean, it's going to be tough, and the AFC's weak. To me, that's the huge thing.
Yeah.
This conference is, and it's because of injuries. They would have been stacked if it was not for injuries. But, I mean, that's going to be their best chance. To me, it's really just us in Baltimore at this moment.
Yeah, I think that's another reason why I'm so confident that if the Chiefs can just figure it out a little bit, they can go back to the Super Bowl with this wide receiver core, because the AFC is very weak. Right now, I mean, you have the Buffalo Bills who are falling apart, and the Bengals just lost Joe Burrow for the season. At the moment, it is the Baltimore Ravens, the Jacksonville Jaguars, and that's really all the competition in the AFC for the Kansas City Chiefs at this point in time. I know the Broncos are trying to make a late push, and there's some other teams in the mix, like Pittsburgh somehow is still in the playoff race. But I still think that these wide receivers are good enough to at least scratch and claw their way to winning 2 or 3 games. It's not going to be pretty. They're not going to put up 30 points, and you're not going to see a 150 to 200 yard game from any one of these wide receivers the rest of the season. It's just not going to happen. But I do think that they can compile at least a good 2 or 3 game stretch to get to that point. And once you're in the Super Bowl, I mean, it's anybody's ball game. But you bring up an interesting point. If the Chiefs are going to see any improvement from the wide receiver core, they need to have somebody step up. And I think that Andy Reid has really used Rashee Rice this year more than he's used any rookie wide receiver in the past. But he is clearly at the moment your best option. You're going to have to give him 10 or 11 targets a game if you want to get any production out of him. And I think that they have just lacked to do that. Kadarius Toney, I understand that, he's had some injury problems, and the thought process is that, he's just a gadget wide receiver. What did he do in 6 games last year for this team? He didn't look like a gadget wide receiver. He looked much better than the wide receiver that we've seen this year. And I think a lot of that is how he's been utilized. And at the end of the day, if you're not targeting those guys, how can you expect them to produce? So I think we're having all these conversations about how bad the wide receiver core is. And listen, they're not good. They're just not. They don't have a number one. They don't really have a ton of talent stacked in there. They've got some guys that are special, but at the same time, they're not special any more than any of the other guys in the league. But that's not the point. The problem is right now, you have players like Rashee Rice and Kadarius Toney, and I would even argue Sky Moore not getting the touches that MVS and Justin Watson are getting. And that's your problem. I understand that Mahomes might trust those other 2 guys more, but why would he trust those guys when all they've done is drop the ball and make really bad mistakes as veteran wide receivers? So if I'm Andy Reid and I'm scheming up an offensive attack, Kadarius Toney and Rashee Rice are going to be my go-to guy for this offense. And I think if he can do that, we're going to see a lot better of a product on Sunday.
Definitely. And I think that's a great point you just made. I do think they need to kind of focus on one or two guys and go from there, because this is essentially the same wide receiver core as we had last year. The difference is you don't have Juju Smith-Schuster anymore. And was he a superstar? No, I said this all yesterday, but he was a solid veteran wide receiver that did exactly what he was asked to do, and he was reliable. And that took pressure off of Kelce, because you had to respect another wide receiver. And when you don't have a single wide receiver who's respected, it makes it tough on that whole group. Because I know people are talking about Kelce, and I don't mean this to be a hater in any way. Travis Kelce's probably my favorite football player on the Kansas City Chiefs, but you can start to see the age creeping up on Kelce a little bit. I mean, he's talked about it before on his podcast, that his athletic moves that he's tried to make this year and years past would have been easy. They're not that easy anymore. And he's 34. So to go into this season and ask him, you know what, Travis, you know you're going to get double teamed and triple teamed every single possession, but we still need you to do your thing. And he's doing it. But it's taking a toll on him, and he's not going to be able to, like, if it comes down to the playoffs, for example, this Eagles game, the 2-minute drill, I mean, what happened? They got to Kelce twice, but they had to kill for those. It took everything in their power to get those, and nobody else showed up. And that's what I would be worried about would happen during the playoffs. And,
really quickly, though, let me jump in really quickly. In that 2-minute drill, the only guy that Patrick Mahomes trusted to catch the football was Travis Kelce.
Yeah. And that's the reality of where we're at right now. I mean, it sucks, but that's just, you know what I mean? That's just kind of the only spot we're at. And I think a lot of this, I know it's just kind of looking forward, I guess, but I think you have some frustration with Veach a little bit about this. And I guess kind of his approach, I feel like he wasn't aggressive enough at the deadline, and that's just Veach's style. You know, I mean, I think we all kind of assumed going into the deadline, that's not what he does. He doesn't make moves like that. So I would have been fairly surprised if he did make a move, but I mean, getting Mecole wasn't enough. I would have loved to have seen them go out and get a guy like Mike Evans and give up a little bit, but you're able to have contract negotiations with him this year, because this offseason is going to be crazy. And so obviously we still have to finish out this season, but I mean, realistically, they're going to have to get another wide receiver. I think that's where we're at with this group. They can't run it back next year. It's just not good. And if you're going to, there's a very, very high chance Chris Jones won't be back in a Kansas City Chiefs jersey next year. You're going to have to make decisions about a lot of other players on the defensive side of the ball. So take some of that money and go to the offensive side. And you need to give Patrick Mahomes at least one more weapon to help him and Kelce out. But it's going to be tough, but I do think they can get it done this year.
I definitely agree. It's interesting because a lot of people around the NFL that aren't Chiefs fans are like, oh, don't the Chiefs miss Tyreek Hill now? No. The Chiefs won the Super Bowl last year without Tyreek Hill. I don't think the Chiefs are missing Tyreek Hill. I think the Chiefs are missing Juju Smith-Schuster, like you said earlier. I also think the Chiefs are missing a reliable pass-catching option outside of Travis Kelce. If you had Byron Pringle on this offense right now, I think a lot of us would be breathing a lot easier, but that is not the case. The Chiefs just need anybody who is reliable, and the problem so far this season, not a lot of these guys have proven to be reliable. And if they are reliable, they're not getting enough of a sample size. I think Rashee Rice is your number one wide receiver right now, and it's not particularly close. He should be getting the majority of your workload, but whether it is just his age, his inexperience, his knowledge of the playbook, we're probably not going to see him get number one wide receiver type looks this season. But I think if he had 11 or 12 receptions a game, he's going to give you 100 yards plus. Yep. And I think he could really open up this offense because he is so quick and shifty. And, you know, we talked about it in previous Bleacher Report streams. I didn't know he was as fast as he was when he had the ball in his hands. There was a play, I can't remember who was against, where he caught like a little option pass and just explode. It was like 3rd and 19, and he ended up getting the first down. It was just incredible to see him go from 0 to 100 seemingly instantly.
Yeah, and he kind of runs like Pacheco a little bit, honestly. It's fun to watch. He's a bruiser. He loves to make contact. And I really agree with this comment that Beans had. I think there's a difference. Trust in who is open. Watson last game versus the others is a good example. Definitely. I think Watson was able to get open. The matchup that was there helped, and I couldn't agree more with that. I think Mahomes looked to him because he was open. And I think guys like Justin Watson, I think he might be the only one on this roster that I'll give a bailout to, because it's the same way I kind of felt about Rashad Fenton last year. It's not that I think they're bad football players. It's just that realistically, they're just rotational pieces. But in the situation that's currently here on this roster, like Justin Watson is being asked to, instead of being just a rotational piece, he's being asked to be one of the mainstays in the wide receiver room. And that's not who Justin Watson is. And that's no shade to Justin Watson. It's just, I mean, let's be realistic about what kind of player he is. If he's your wide receiver 4 or 5, and you have a tight end like Travis Kelce, heck yeah, all day. Give me that. That's a great little piece to have. But in this offense, I mean, he's basically a wide receiver 2 or 3 right now. And that's just worrisome. So it feels like we're a broken record at this point with a lot of the points we make, just because it's so frustrating. We've watched it all year. But I think at this point, it's kind of us. I think we might just have to accept this is kind of what they're going to be. I do think they can improve slightly, and I think the improvement's more or less going to come from the play calling and Patrick Mahomes' decision making here and there. And I'm not blaming Pat for this. Don't get me wrong. I don't want this to get taken out of context where, you know, it seems like I'm saying Pat's the reason why this receiving core is struggling. No, he's not. He is dealing with them, but Pat's not doing them any favors when he is. When they are getting open in the end zone, not throwing it there. But I mean, that's all stuff that's correctable, and Patrick Mahomes will correct that. He's the best quarterback for a reason. But man, it's going to be interesting to see what they do this offseason. I hope it's like what we did with the O-line. I really think they're going to just have to completely overhaul this, get a wide receiver in the draft, go out and try to sign a guy. I know there's a couple decent ones, but I don't mean to jump forward, but that's kind of where I'm at out of the frustration levels, is that you're already looking towards, 6 months from now when we're able to make some moves and replenish this wide receiver room.
Well, see, you're entirely correct. The Chiefs are going to have to overhaul this unit in the offseason. But right now, you're sitting at 7-3. You're the 2 seed in the AFC. If you can finish strong, you got a very strong chance at that number 1 seed and the playoff bye. You don't want to throw away a season of prime Patrick Mahomes, and especially if it's the wide receiver's fault. It's different if it's the defense's fault or, maybe just coaching blunders. If you lose because the wide receivers around him just weren't able to catch the football, that's a tough pill to swallow, especially like we've been talking about for the past couple days. The AFC is wide open. If you could figure it out to a certain extent, you could run through this conference. And that would be really tough to play in an AFC championship game or play in the divisional round, and your receivers can't catch the football and you end up losing. And that is something that I don't even want to think about because, quite frankly, it upsets me. Yeah. But while we are thinking ahead to next offseason of how they're going to fix it, the Chiefs cannot fix this problem right now. Right now, they're going to have to figure out ways that they can adjust and scheme around the problem. Listen, you have Isaiah Pacheco. You might have to run the ball a little bit more. Or maybe, hear me out, maybe use Pacheco more in the screen game, have him catch passes out of the backfield. He might add something to this offense that you haven't seen before and defenses haven't seen before. Use Jerick McKinnon more in the screen, and he's a really good pass catcher, actually. Get your backs involved because clearly the wide receivers are having problems catching the football. Maybe if you start running the ball more and using more of your running backs as wide receivers, a little dump-off passes, it might add an element to this offense that makes them better.
Yeah, and I really am going to hopefully try to take last game as a little bit of the turning point, because in that first half, Pacheco was killing the Eagles. The Eagles have this year have had the best run defense in the NFL, and we're averaging 5.6 yards a carry, I believe was the number we were talking about yesterday. Like, to take that per carry against the Eagles is crazy. Then come the second half, they just completely went away from it. And I hate that. And also, though, the other thing, too, that they did differently that I really like was, and my biggest gripe all year has been, and really throughout the Andy Reid regime, is whenever it's 3rd and 1, 4th and 1, They love to get cute. It's like, oh, let's throw a screen pass to Mecole on the outside, or let's try to do some trickery. Like, just you're the best interior O-line in football on a bruising running back. Just run the ball up the middle. And that's what they did against Philadelphia. And they got first downs. There was a lot. That's why they were so good on their third down conversions last night for the majority of the game is when it was third and short, they didn't get cute. They ran the football. And I agree with a lot of the comments of what people have been saying. In my personal opinion, I think Pacheco's the second best weapon on this team. I think he's proven himself to be. I think Pacheco is a great running back. I think he can give you 1K yards a season if you give him the snaps, and he's got some burst and a chance to make bigger plays too. So I don't understand why they haven't run with him more. I think last game might be a good sign that, hey, maybe we are going to lean into him more. But at the end of the day, if there was anybody I trusted with scheming up these wide receivers and fixing this offense, it's Andy Reid. There is nobody better for this situation that we could ask for than the greatest offensive mind in the history of football. So, and if this is the way they go out, like you said, it would suck. Like if we lose because of Andy Reid's coaching in a game, a call, or because Patrick Mahomes, I would say in the Bengals game where he played poorly, so be it. To me, that's fine with me. If we lose with either by the hands of the best coach or the best quarterback, you know what? That's fine with me. I'd rather it be in their hands than the reason why we lost is a dropped MVS deep ball in the playoffs. Like that would just be brutal.
And honestly, the whole Pacheco thing has got me thinking, maybe you experiment next week and give him 25 carries and just see what happens. And I will say, so for those of you who watch, I work for the Kansas City Chiefs. I was at the game on Monday night, and I was down on the field for pregame, and watching the kickers and punters warm up with the football and watching the ball getting thrown in the air, it was raining. It was miserable. It was wet and soggy. And every time the ball got kicked through the uprights and hit the back net, water would just explode from it. Yeah. So while I do think that they need to catch the football because it is their job to catch the football, the elements definitely did not help. It definitely made it harder on those wide receivers to catch the football. Now, I don't think that's why MVS dropped that football, but I do think the elements had some factor in the Monday night blunders that we saw. But I wanted to address this comment by Beans. Do you think Eric Bieniemy's departure is a factor? No, I don't, because Eric Bieniemy didn't make guys catch the football. Eric Bieniemy didn't, scheme up these wide receivers any better. I mean, we've had problems with the play calling in spurts ever since Andy Reid has been here. It's always been the 3rd and 1 and the 4th and 1, how they always put the ball in Patrick Mahomes' hands, or they try to get too cute instead of just running the football. I think maybe if Bieniemy was here, they would run the ball more. But even then, Andy Reid has and always will be the guy that calls the shots.
Yeah, I think the way it would have a factor in things, if anything, would be the motivation factor. I do think Bieniemy had a really good way to be able to kind of get under these guys' skin and in a good way and, be able to motivate them to an extent. I think that's what Bieniemy really brought. I think he's a great coordinator. But, I think Andy Reid's always kind of said he has 51%. So at the end of the day, and that's why I haven't really liked people getting on Nagy as much this year, because Nagy has an input, but it's Andy Reid's call at the end of the day. Every single game, Andy Reid is the one that's going to be making these calls. And so when it comes down to that, I think it's his call. I couldn't agree with you more. I do think a lot of this is just kind of on the receivers themselves. I mean, you can't teach how to hold on to the football. Like that's
or
just
separation. You can't teach that.
No, I mean, it's the same way where in kind of like basketball, there's a reason why teams don't coach free throws. That's just something you've got to work on your own. Like that's just what you got to do. So for these guys, I think it is a factor in a motivation standpoint, but I think that it would be similar to what's going on regardless if he stayed or not. I don't think it'd be too big of a difference. I think Pacheco could be more involved, as you kind of said, but I don't think it's going to be the end all be all. Like I think it's just kind of, it is what it is. And they got to deal with the cards that we've been dealt. Yeah.
Honestly though, I would really like to see this offense run the ball more. And with the current wide receivers, and not only do I think they need to run the ball more, but it's the situations in which they need to run the ball. On 2nd and long, run the ball and get like 4 or 5 yards and make it a 3rd and 5 instead of a 3rd and 10. Because a 3rd and 10, Mahomes drops back to pass, finds a receiver. That receiver has the ball clink off his hands, hits the ground. It's 4th and 10. You got to punt. At least if you can get 5 yards on 2nd down or get 3 or 4 on 1st down, you're going to have a much better chance when you get in those short yardage situations to go for it. The Chiefs are not the Chiefs offense of old where 3rd and 10 and 3rd and 15 or even 3rd and 25 felt like nothing. I remember a couple years ago, if the Chiefs got in like 3rd and 15, I was like, okay, we've got Tyreek Hill. We have Travis Kelce. This offense is dynamic. I'm not worried whatsoever. If the Chiefs get in a 3rd and long situation now, I'm sweating bullets. It's because their conversion rate has gone way down, even on like 3rd and short situations. So I do think they need to run the ball more. If anything, just to make it so your wide receivers aren't tasked with catching 30 balls a night, because clearly they had not been doing that.
Yeah, I think the third down struggles to me more come down to play calling, I think, than even the players sometimes. I really do. I think that a lot of times the plays are just questionable, drawn up plays. And I mean, like in Miami, where Andy Reid on that last possession of the game, I can't remember if it was third and 2 or 3, whatever it was. And he decided to draw up a play for Travis Kelce, who's been double teamed that entire game. And shocker, didn't work. Just run the football. You know what I mean? I think that's what they did against the Eagles. And I think that's what's been great. And yeah, Beans' comment just right now. Yeah, definitely. This defense has been so fun to watch. I mean, it's been electric. And that's why we're as good as we are this year. Yeah. I mean, like McDuffie is becoming one of the best corners in the NFL in front of our eyes. I don't know if you saw a stat line from last night. Monday night. It looked like pass rusher stats, dude. It was crazy. And that is, I think that's just kind of the way of football too. Kind of like how you said, there's no two sides. Two sides normally aren't great at the same time. I think just the way money's kind of set up in football, it's tough too, because you kind of have to pick and choose. You know what I mean? It's either, do you want to be mediocre on both sides of the ball, or do you want to be great on one side and on the other? And so this year, fortunately, somewhat, I guess, the defensive side of the ball has been spectacular, and it's been one of the best Chiefs defenses I can remember. So it's been a lot of fun to watch that.
And the defense is going to give this team a chance to go late into the postseason. And thank God, because right now they need this defense. And I do think that the wide receivers are good enough to win the Super Bowl. It's going to be tough. Listen, it's not going to be easy. A lot of ugly games are going to be played. But hey, that's football. And I do think out of everything the Chiefs have had going for them this year, the defense being so elite, and you still have Andy Reid. And guess what? In some of the years where we haven't had a very good offense, we didn't have Patrick Mahomes. So since we have Patrick Mahomes, I'm a lot more confident in him getting the job done. And that's why I think the Chiefs wide receiver core is going to be good enough to win the Super Bowl this year if they can just get out of their own way. So for Michael Darcy and Joey Segura, thank you for watching this Kansas City Chiefs live stream presented by Bleacher Report.